Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, it's Mark Graban here. Welcome to episode 474 of the podcast. It's May 3rd, 2023. Our guest today is Norbert Majerus. We're going to learn more about him in a minute. We're going to be talking about lean and innovation. So to learn more about Norbert, his books and more, look for links in the show notes, or you can go to leanblog.org/474. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Lean Blog Interviews. Our guest today is Norbert Majerus. He has his own consulting firm now, but he previously worked 40 years for Goodyear. He joined the company in 1978 in his home country of Luxembourg. He moved to Akron, Ohio in 1983 and worked with Goodyear Innovation Centers in both countries, retiring in 2018. His first book was released in 2016. It's titled Lean-Driven Innovation, Powering Product Development at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. It was a recipient of the Shingo Publication Award. And his latest book, I'll hold it up here for those who are watching, is Winning Innovation, How Innovation Excellence Propels an Industry Icon Towards Sustained Prosperity. So congratulations on the Shingo recognition, and congratulations on the second book. How are you, Norbert?
Oh, pretty good. And thanks for inviting me to share my ideas here on your podcast. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for being here. There's a lot to explore about innovation and lean and talking about the two books. But, first off, Norbert, as we would like to do here, everyone's got a unique story of how they were first introduced to lean this or Toyota that. So what would you say is your origin story related to all of this?
Well, I am a Six Sigma Master Black Belt, and I have to say that I really enjoyed Six Sigma work. It's very scientific, and we got a lot out of it. If you do it right, you can really you get a lot out of it. And I really enjoyed it. You can dig into deep problems and hide behind your computer. You don't have to worry about people too much. And I really enjoyed that. And then we got a new vice president, and he said, "Yeah, I like what you do with lean." He said, "But with Six Sigma," I said, "But I want to really push lean harder for product development and see." And I said, "No way." I said that I'm happy what I'm doing. No way. And but he didn't give up, and I'm glad he didn't. And so he kept asking me a few more times. And then I was at the point I knew if I say no this time, he would not ask me again. And that's when I said yes. But there was one thing that I learned here. He really was committed to it. He wouldn't have asked me 3 times. And if he hadn't been extremely serious supporting lean in the Innovation Center. And as I said, for me, it was a risk. It was something new that not a lot of people have been successful with it. But I'm really glad I did, because it worked really, really well. And why not? I mean, and we didn't have to invent anything new, by the way. The same lean thinking, same lean principles, same lean people management that you would use in other areas. They worked fine for us. So.
Yeah. Was that vice president new to Goodyear? Did they come in as an outsider? Do you know?
No. He actually came. He actually came from Luxembourg too, so we could speak our native language. His name is Jean-Claude Keen. I quote him a lot in my book. And he had been in Latin America, actually in Peru, and he learned lean there, and especially in a simulation. And that he's a good thinker. And he said, well, when he came in back to product development, why would this not work in the Innovation Center? And I really, I'm glad he did have that that thought, because it does work really, really well.
So why do you remember why you said no at first, or why you were hesitant? I mean, was it a matter of, well, Six Sigma worked well enough for you, or what were you thinking then?
Well, I'm an engineer, okay, and maybe I went into engineering because I didn't like to work with people. At least that did cross my mind, and I was happy if people left me alone with my computer. And I worked some really nice projects with Six Sigma, and really successful on a global basis for the company. And why stop a good thing? That was my first one. Number two, the company had tried lean a few times in manufacturing, and it was not successful at all. So I'm thinking by myself, man, that has such a negative now connotation now that the experience isn't good. So why would I leave something that is a lot of fun to do something that it may not even work? Yeah. So that was my main thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, even if we think of good lean problem solving models, if lean was being presented as a solution, it's fair to ask, well, what's the problem? What problem are we trying to solve? It sounds like you thought things were going well, right? Yeah. Now, were you applying, and I did some green belt training. I'm not a Six Sigma trained person. We don't talk about that a lot here, but it gives us an opportunity for me to ask, were you using quote unquote design for Six Sigma in that product development context?
Yeah, that was one of my projects, yes. And it was about, well, I don't want to bore people with too many details here, but it was about the performance of tires all over the United States, in cold areas and in very hot states and so on. That was leading to a design for Six Sigma. But another very successful project was J.D. Power. A lot of people are familiar with J.D. Power, and J.D. Power did a tire survey every year, and Goodyear was always coming in last in that survey. And even though we had at that time the major market share, and there were questions asked, and our president at that time, Bob Keegan, met David Power in Detroit, and it was like, well, why is Goodyear never winning it? And Bob Keegan says, well, I mean, that's not a good survey. My people tell me that that it's not a very scientific survey and so on. And then Bob Keegan, and then David Power says, well, that's what all the losers are saying. And of course, that now I had support. And J.D. Power actually gave me many years worth of data. So I had a very big database. And I could do real statistics with it. That like I had enough data to come to real conclusions. And then I went back to J.D. Power and I showed them some of the weaknesses and some of the good things. And they asked me for my recommendation. And I made the recommendation. And the next year we won the J.D. Power Award. Because, but I also have to say they did accept my recommendation. Six Sigma can really work for you if you understand it and do it right.
So am I hearing you right that it was really a change to the J.D. Power methodology as opposed to a change in how the tires were designed and manufactured?
Yeah, well, of course, it was more a change to their methodology, because if we did redesign the tires, okay, so don't get me wrong, but that would be 4 or 5 years until they appear in the survey. And I didn't have time to wait that long. So I had a recommendation, and it was a very good recommendation. It made the award much more appropriate, much better, and they accepted it. But I also knew when I made the recommendation what the results would be.
Sure.
Hey,
yeah, I mean,
that's real science applied to what what they pay me to do at work. So.
Sure. Now, you mentioned earlier this idea of Six Sigma was effective if you do it right. We could say the same thing about Lean. I'm curious, I mean, you might not have been in the middle of this, but did you hear explanations for why, when you say Goodyear had tried Lean in manufacturing, it didn't work well? Do you know, was it a matter of not doing it right, not trying long enough? What did you hear?
That's a very clear answer. I didn't understand it when I went to that plant the first time, but Goodyear had a plant. They hired the best that they could get with their knowledge about Lean. The process they implemented was absolutely awesome. I looked at it. I said, man, this is fantastic, but it didn't work. And you know why it didn't work? They did not engage the people. I didn't know it at that time. It was just like, hey, do this, and do that. And there was a little bit of teaching, but it was just enough teaching that the people understood what they were supposed to do. But it was not, that was it. And there was one person who didn't even speak English very well. I needed a translator to, obviously came from Japan, had learned Lean from the absolute best. And as I said, absolutely amazing what they knew, what they did. But later I understood it didn't work because they didn't engage the people. They should have taught the people in the plant, work with the people in the plant, get them, let them deploy it and let them run it and so on and coach them along. That was the piece that was missing. And then I went back to other areas where it was also tried and didn't work so well, and exactly the same thing. Yeah. It was kind of, hey, do this rather than how can we help you be successful with this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier things including Lean as a way to manage, that this is consistent, whether it's healthcare even or different types of environments. But, I have seen and been around quote unquote Lean initiatives where it was basically some expert telling people how to rearrange all the equipment.
There we go. That's exactly
that's Lean. But that was, what they did was probably correct, but insufficient. Like you said, if the people didn't understand, if they barely understood why things were being arranged, and rearranging equipment doesn't mean you're managing any differently.
Yeah. Well, it did work for a while, really well. And it worked as long as they were there managing it. But eventually it got over their head. There were 4 people. It got over their head. And there was no owning of the system. Nobody owned it. And the minute they left, a few months later, there wasn't much left of it. Yeah. And it didn't sustain itself. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, if you'll indulge me, a quick General Motors story from 1995. I came into a plant where somebody had copied a design for a quote unquote Lean department. We were making cutting metal for engine blocks. And it was designed with the idea of, it's going to flow. Uptime is going to be high. We're not going to buffer everywhere, meaning pull parts off, pull inventory off. It wasn't designed for that. But then before long, the people trying to run that new design, they had their old habits of saying anytime a machine was down, we're going to pull parts off and have piles of inventory everywhere. And they weren't doing the preventive maintenance that would have kept the machines running. And to me, that was a very clear lesson in a mismatch between how an area is designed to be quote unquote Lean. But if you're not going to run it that way, it could be even worse. It could perform worse than it was back, previous generation.
Yeah, the other thing, by the way, that brings up another thought that was a big piece of it too. They put Lean on top of an MRP system. The factory was run by a computer, and the accountants and everybody was counting on that system, and they needed it to keep running like that. Now you get your planning system from the computer, and you want to plug in the pull system on top of it. that only works, again, if you engage everybody. And in this case, it would not have been only the factory workers to be engaged, but also the leadership, all the different functions involved, from purchasing to planning to finance, and everybody had to really rethink that approach and become part of it, and then work together to make this work and integrate the pull into the MRP system. So.
Yeah, that's another great example of a mismatch in sort of adopting one practice being out of sync with other ways. Now, when you talk about the first attempts with Lean at Goodyear and not engaging people, like this seems clearly before the time when Billy Taylor was rising through the ranks, because Lean, it sounds like Goodyear, because of Billy and others, eventually figured it out. And Billy, I know, is huge on engaging people. Did you meet him and work with Billy?
Oh yeah, Billy. Yes, we did. We spent about 5 years at least at Goodyear working together. Where Billy, it didn't happen overnight either. But I have to give Billy great credit. When he got the Shingo Award at Lawton, everybody in Action asked, "What is this?" And they didn't even know what it was. And he had gotten the Shingo Award there. I mean, that was, and then Billy, you have to understand, he had to run many plants. But the plant that I'm talking about was one of Billy's plants, but not when this all, the initiative was deployed there. He was put in charge of that plant later.
Okay.
So it didn't happen on his shift.
Yeah. So Norbert, I was looking, at your bio, and beyond being born and raised in Luxembourg, it says in your bio that you were raised on a farm. And the reason I bring this up is, Toyota is always said to be, a fairly rural company, but they were farmers or coming, from farming community. I'm curious from your perspective, growing up on a farm, do you see where some of those mindsets of Lean are kind of intuitive to a farmer as opposed to, say, a hunter?
Well, the one thing you learn on a farm, you have virtually no resources. Okay, you still have to make things work, and you become extremely resourceful, and that is something that the Toyota fathers of Lean, they really had to make it work with what they had in Japan at that time to compete with. And I'm not surprised that that's where they learned it. I mean, you really have no tools. Your machine breaks. What are you going to do? You're going to have to invent or become creative to keep it working, because you have a day of sunshine and you have to get your crop in. And I think that resourcefulness, the relying on the few resources that make the best out of those few resources, is something that I'm not surprised that's how it grew up. That's how they developed that culture, I think, or that piece of the culture.
Yeah. And it sounds like with what you went and studied, and you probably didn't have any interest in taking over the farm, did you?
No, well, that would have been very difficult because it happened to be a very small farm, and farms of that size had no chance at that time to survive in the global environment. I mean, Europe, all of a sudden, you used to sell your goods to the people down the street, but now all of a sudden, with the European Union, now you compete with the farmers in France that are 100 times bigger than or the northern German farms. So there was no that future would have been very difficult.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you also, Norbert, on one level, you talk about how Lean is lean, but the principles are the same. Yeah. Coming to your books and using the word innovation, and in some settings we talk about improvement. How big is the distinction between improvement and innovation? How do you think of those two words?
Well, most improvement you can say is innovation. You can look at it that way. But the stretch that comes in with innovation, if it becomes disruptive. And if it becomes disruptive, lean and disruptive don't always go together so well. But the principles, you can apply the same lean thinking even to disruptive innovation. It's just if you understand the principles, you know how it works. I was at a plant last year for the AME award, and I was amazed how innovative they were. I was amazed how innovative the people were on the assembly line with the way they solved their problems there. They did not have a marketing strategy to implement a new product. I mean, that's done in the office. But their thinking was way out of the box and very creative. And they were also empowered to do those changes. And that's something that I give the company a lot of credit for, because a lot of companies, they say, well, you can change as long as you don't do anything. That rocks the boat here.
Right.
But these people didn't, it was whatever they came up with, they gave them a chance to try it. And it became very, very creative and became very effective, by the way. Stuff that I've not seen in another plant, that level of creativity. So it's not, it works everywhere.
Mm. So, I mean, when you use the word creativity, it makes me think of Norman Bodek, who passed away a couple of years ago. This podcast was his idea back in the day. He was he was very creative, and he emphasized, as you were talking about, Norbert, how everybody has creativity. People on the factory floor, people in offices, people in the executive suites. We all have the ability to be creative, but a lot of companies stifle that creativity.
Yes, absolutely.
And then they wonder, why aren't people being creative?
Absolutely. And by the way, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Norm Bodek was one of the first books that I've ever read about lean, and it really inspired me, by the way. Now, let me give you share another experience with you. I came to Akron, and I had done some creative work with airplane tires. Okay, probably the last place where you should take a risk. And I find myself in a meeting where the director, I didn't even know I ended up in the meeting, and but the meeting only had one purpose. The director wanted to make it very clear that the stuff like that will not be done on his shift. And I got that message very, very clearly, and so did everybody else who was in the meeting. Got the message, and people talked to each other, and everybody that was very clear. Hey, we're not taking these kind of risks, and I'm saying the airplane tires, they look the same now than they looked. They looked probably 100 years ago, or 50, 60, 70 years ago. And maybe that was the reason they still look the same today. So that the fear of risk and that fear of rocking the boat or anything is probably the biggest obstacle that companies have when it comes to innovation.
Yeah, so it's funny, it's interesting, Norbert. You talk about this phrase disruptive innovation. We think of Clayton Christensen and the academics and the tech companies that are all like excited about disruptive innovation. But if you are the disrupted, now it becomes scary or threatening. And so that innovator's dilemma is Christian.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Clayton Christensen called it. I mean, were you able to find ways within Goodyear, or are you helping organizations now find ways to get past that trap?
Oh yes. In fact, right now, the Tesla-Toyota story, where Toyota is criticized for not being far enough along on electric vehicles, and I even understand they did a reorganization, and I also heard that some Tesla advisors are now working for Toyota, and that's good, a good thing to do. And a lot of people say, hey, maybe Toyota isn't what we all thought Toyota is. And I disagree with that, because what happened to Toyota is exactly what Christensen wrote in his book about the innovator's dilemma. The companies who are the best at doing what they are doing are the least likely to lead the disruptive innovation, because Toyota has their process. Every so many years, they launch a perfect product. Tesla wasn't able to do that. Tesla launched the product and it wasn't so great, and they learned, and then they launched another one very quickly, and they learned again, and they learned again. But it is this process that we are talking about here. This some people call it agile or whatever. These quick experiments to learn, because innovation is about learning. The first part of it. And those quick learning cycles is actually, Eric Ries wrote about that in his book, Lean Startups. And that is a totally new aspect, the Lean Startup, the agile, and all these tools developed by the computer industry. They did find its place into most companies now, and those are wonderful tools to overcome this. What you call it? This to manage this risk that a lot of these bigger companies see. The other problem, of course, and Christensen says that very clearly, it's very difficult to do it as a big company. And a lot of big companies, what they try to do, they buy a smaller company to make them successful in a smaller market, or they spin off a company. Johnson & Johnson has done that very well. That there are ways to do it. And for me, it all comes back to the culture. It obviously wasn't in the Toyota culture, that piece. But I believe that it can be in most people's culture. Companies can learn that. I worked for one that knew how to do it. I know a lot of other companies like 3M, and I had the chance to go to Google once and really learn a lot about how they do it. This can be done, and I'm sure Toyota is on the way to learn it. And it certainly can be done. There's enough research. Only talking about Christensen alone, there's a lot of research there that shows companies and teaches them how to do it. So I'm encouraging everybody to not only go for a lean culture, but go for what I call a lean culture of innovation. You can combine those two.
Right.
They are not the one does not do any harm to the other. You can really run those in perfect synergy.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking of Toyota again, I mean, arguably Toyota did very innovative things with the Prius and hybrid technologies. They can innovate. But, I think back to Eric Ries and Steve Blank and these, lean startup type methodologies. There's always the questions of, can we build something, and should we build something? And, Akio Toyoda as CEO, it made many comments publicly about, not believing that an all electric strategy is really the right way to go. And he's criticized for that. And he's not doing what most of the other major automakers are doing. But now that he's stepping aside as CEO, he made some comments recently about how his replacement is probably the better person to lead that charge, right? So it comes back to more of strategic intent. Where are you directing the innovation? What does that seem fair to say?
Yeah, that is correct. But the innovation, you don't direct the innovation; the market directs the innovation.
Fair enough.
And when Toyota, the Prius, and all those cars, they still went to the gas station to get gas. Okay. the Tesla cannot go to the gas station to get gas, even though here in Florida you can now drive up and there are Tesla charging stations there. But that is the big difference. The other thing that that plays here is what's called the chasm in the innovation. Okay, the electric vehicle only came that far because the battery wasn't ready. Now you can say, okay, we just get out of it now, or you say, hey, we keep this going because the battery, in case the battery develops, we have it and we can launch it. And that was a big kicker. And I think that was maybe you call it luck, maybe it's intuition, maybe it's foresight. That is something that good innovator says. And obviously Elon Musk had that foresight and the battery came to his aid. And so a big piece of again, it comes back to understanding innovation, all what is to it, including in this case that it took a break waiting for the battery to come along.
Well, and that seems to be part of the challenge with innovation and the innovator's dilemma, that the technology at first doesn't seem good enough to replace the old. I mean, General Motors was the first, the EV1, in the 90s, the first electric vehicle on the market. If I remember right, it only had a range of something like 50 miles. It certainly wasn't 300 miles plus.
And it had Goodyear tires.
Okay. Good. And Kodak was an early developer, if not the first developer of digital cameras. And I'll tell you, when I did an internship at Kodak in 1998, the digital cameras were either extremely expensive for professionals, like $15,000, or they were toys that were really terrible. Like they really, the consumer digital cameras were very low resolution. And Kodak, I mean, they got caught behind the curve. And if they hadn't been really crushed by digital cameras, they would have been crushed by phones because, the digital camera makers got caught up in different innovations, right?
Well, Kodak actually in 1974 had the first working digital camera. I have a picture of it because the person who developed it gave me the picture. Yeah. So they had the technology, but then again, Bob Keegan joined Goodyear in the 90s, and he was the vice president of the films division. And he said, if you make 80% net profit on film, why would you even think about
right
doing anything else? And but he was already he left Kodak when the writing was on the wall.
Yeah. And then, one other comment, I mean, I don't want to take too deep of a dive into Tesla, but back to your point about the ability to combine, if you will, lean manufacturing with innovative products. My understanding as an outsider of, part of the Tesla history is, maybe a different innovator's trap, where it's said that Elon thought, well, of course, I can create a better way to manufacture the cars. I don't need to learn from Toyota and the others who've come before me. And there's, a long history there where it seems like, Toyota was an investor. It seemed like Toyota was trying to help, and then they ended up, sort of parting ways. And I mean, it's interesting. A lot of Tesla's problems have been on the production side. How much, it's the unknowable thought experiment of how much more successful would they have been with the Toyota manufacturing model that had lived in that factory, that had gone from GM old thinking to NUMMI Toyota thinking to now Tesla, which is not Toyota thinking. So it's just interesting.
Everything that is knowledge, everything that is learned, everything that is best practices out there. I think you have to learn that, or you will be behind. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. If there is a best way to manufacture cars, and that is lean, and that is the Toyota manufacturing system, then there's no reason not to do it, because you can learn it. It's out there. You can learn it. But the same way, by the way, you can learn innovation. You can learn lean innovation the same way. I mean, there are best practices that you can learn from. And I'm sure Toyota will pick those up.
Yeah. It seems like, there's a couple pieces here, and, you emphasize these both in the book. There's the rapid problem solving and experimentation, whether we call that design for Six Sigma or lean product development or agile product development. And then there's the piece, it comes from Toyota language, respect for people.
Yep.
So in your experience, how do those two concepts best fit together when it comes to product development and innovation?
As I said, I went into engineering because I was uncomfortable dealing with people. But I have to say today that after I learned lean, the typical management philosophy of lean, like the respect for people, the humble leadership, and all those things, I really, this was an eye-opener for me. I had gone to many classes, leadership classes, all kinds of, there was always a little bit that stuck. But I have to tell you, the lean education was a real eye-opener for me. Today, I would say, I wish I had learned that earlier in my career. I would have had a totally different career. I'm not saying I'm an expert on people, but I'm comfortable. I'm very comfortable around people because that is the way I would have loved to do it. It wasn't the standard. It wasn't encouraged. I would have loved to do it that way. That's really helping you with innovation. And I tell you, engaging the people is the best thing you can do to make them creative, to make them innovative, to encourage them to think out of the box. And the other thing that the humility, you don't give them solutions. You just help them find the best solutions. That is as fundamental to creativity as anything you can do. So for me, that is a really, really great way of managing an innovation organization. And also, for example, I went through several of those innovation organizations where you are separate. That was my first experience, the skunk works approach. That was my first experience. And a lot of companies have an innovation office. That's not the way to do it. It doesn't work that way. It only works when people work together, when they collaborate from the first minute of the idea. You get input from everybody, and you build this thing together. Everything else takes too long. Nothing else. I learned that in Lean. And it works fabulous when you apply it to innovation, whether you develop a new process or a new service or a new product, whatever. Mm-hmm. So for me, the basic people management of Lean does wonderful things for innovation.
Yeah. You're making me think of what you described earlier, where, kind of forcing people to do certain lean things that might be successful for a while, but it doesn't last, it doesn't sustain. I mean, it seems like there are companies we could point to where, without that respect for people, without humility, without that level of engagement, they could be innovative for a while, but does that catch up to them eventually? If you think of companies where, let's say, people. Word gets around quickly that if you disagree with the CEO, you get fired.
Yes, I had that experience.
How long can a company like that continue to be innovative, or being innovative in spite of some of those cultural, I would call them, problems?
The innovation in a case like that works when the person who dictates or makes the rules dictates to do the innovation, and I've seen that happen. And you sell it to the top, and from the top it comes down. Do it. You can be very successful with innovation. But it takes a long time, and it takes an enormous effort, because when it comes down from the top as an edict, does not mean that everybody will do it, and people will prove the top wrong more than prove them right. And the failure rates are very high that way, but also it takes forever. And you can't do that anymore today. The changes in the market are so quick today. You really, the agility is really needed to be successful with it. And people may think it takes longer if you engage people in doing it than when you tell them, and that is wrong. Okay, it's a lot more efficient and faster if you engage people from the beginning, because it may be a little bit of more work at the beginning to get started, but once you get going, you go in the right direction, and everybody pulls, everybody rows the boat in the same direction.
Yeah, but you're making me think of even the opportunity perhaps to engage the market, to engage your customer base in the adoption curve for new technology. Because a couple of minutes ago you made the good point that, of course, the market drives the direction that innovation should go. And I think I remember Akio Toyota making comments of not being convinced that everybody wants to buy an electric vehicle. Or that, and so there's this question of, you're forecasting years into the future. Toyota could have been right on that regard. They could at some point even catastrophically learn that they were as wrong as the Detroit automakers were wrong back in the day about people wanting big, huge, giant gas guzzlers. And so Toyota's read on where the market is going, that's a difficult strategic decision. Then it comes back to the question, let me turn it back to you, of how agile can they be if they're going to change direction and say, you know what, we do need to be all in on a electric only strategy. How fast can they move?
I have to go back to Christiansen again here. On the Toyota's customers probably told them very clearly what they want. They want a car that gets better gas mileage, more comfort, and so on and so on and so on. Nobody told them, I want an electric vehicle, because people are smarter than that. They know they can't charge that vehicle and so on. And Henry Ford already said, if I had asked the customers, they would have said, we want faster horses. So it goes back that far. Oh, and here we go now to the Apple philosophy. Steve Jobs said, every time somebody came with a new idea, he said, show it to me. And somebody showed it to him, and he said, how does this demo? How can we use this to convince the customer that this is better? And in order to do that, you just build a rough prototype of something. And people say, oh, we didn't know this. And now you are talking. Now you have something that you can move, and you can move very fast. And that is, again, comes in the lean startup and has been very popular. I used it a lot. And talking back with my old colleagues at Goodyear, that what it always came down to. It was so simple, and you show it to somebody and they said, oh, that is a great idea. And that is the piece that was brought along with all these entrepreneurs, these lean startup that were successful with these lean startups. They didn't have money. They couldn't do research. The only thing they had is trial and error. Mm-hmm. And then they made that process very, very efficient. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of successful innovation is done that way nowadays.
Yeah. And I think just maybe one other brief exploration of the EV adoption challenge. So, there's maybe this question of showing customers where they should want to be going. But then, there's that whole question of charging and range, and that might be harder to demo. You can sort of try to explain, and Tesla, innovated with their supercharger network help address that. But that consumer behavior, that consumer habit is can be difficult to steer in that direction. Some are uniquely charismatic and convincing, like Steve Jobs.
Let's be clear about that. Tesla did not go to the mass market right away. Tesla went to some niches, and one niche was enthusiasts, people who loved electric vehicles. And they used that market to develop the technology, to develop everything else. And yes, the batteries helped them. If not, they would have had to take a break again until the batteries are at the level. But then what I see right now is how aggressively they develop the charging capacity, because that's what you need to go to the masses now. And that will happen. And I think they are very good at that. And that is also something that prioritization of the most critical thing at the right time that a lot of companies don't know. And I could tell you dozens of stories from Goodyear about that, this will only work if, and it's very clear, Tesla will go to the mass market if the critical mass of charging stations is available. And they know that. That's what they push right now. And that's the entry into the mass market. And then, of course, if the stations are out there, they share them, and Tesla's very good at that sharing. They may share them with Toyota vehicles or other vehicles, which then, of course, helps them.
Yeah. And I know that, between the two books, a lot of stories either directly about Goodyear or maybe inspired by Goodyear and other companies. So again, the most recent book, Winning Innovation, it's available now. Norbert Majerus, who's been joining us here today. So this book is a business novel format. I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit, the thought process around doing it in that format.
Yeah, that is very easy to answer. The more I learned about innovation, the more not about lean to start with. It's all about people, okay? And if you talk about people, it's not just engineering, and it's not all left-brained. There's a lot of right-brained considerations that you have to bring in. There are emotions, there are frustrations, there is anger, there is all those kind of things. And I thought for a long time, how can I bring these in and make sure that people understand that part of a lean transformation? And in those stories, I could put them in there and they come out. And it's real people doing it, and it gives people the courage. Hey, yes, I'm not the only one here. This happens to other people too, and there's a way to get around it, and there's a way to deal with it. That was the main reason that I tried to set it up like that. The most of the stories in the book really happened. They happened at work. But I couldn't put the real names to them or whatever. But most of them really happened like that at work. So if they happened in my environment at work, they would happen to other people in their environment. And it's that idea that I wanted to communicate. I know it's a stretch. And I purposely did not at the end say, okay, now you heard the stories and here are now the principles. I thought that was disrespectful to people. I want people to think. And if they think and they understand, I think they can come up with those principles on their own. That I'm convinced they do.
Yeah. Have you? I mean, the book's been out long enough. You're getting feedback from early readers that they are taking away the principles that you expected them to, or sometimes maybe they come up with an insight that's different. Better.
Some people, the most important comment is, I just read the book to the end. I wanted to know how the love story ends. Okay, good. If that makes you read it to the end, we got what we wanted. I got last week. There's actually this is about a small company. The owner of the company, and I actually got the call from a gentleman. He owns his own company. He said, "Man, this is a great book." He said, "I see myself through this whole thing, and I see how I can do things differently." Yeah, of course. But many people should see themselves in it. I'm actually in the book 3 times. I'm in there as a young engineer who cannot sell his ideas. I'm in there as a leading a major transformation, and I'm in there as how I wish I would have been able to run an organization. So.
Well, Norbert, thank you for sharing your experiences and your insights in the books. Thank you for doing the same thing today. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of all the things that we could discuss and all the things that you could share with us. So I will put in the show notes, of course, links to Norbert's website, the book, the new book, Winning Innovation, How Innovation Excellence Propels an Industry Icon Towards Sustained Prosperity. There will be links also in the show notes to some other articles that Norbert has written for the Lean Enterprise Institute and others. So you can keep learning from Norbert. But thank you to the listeners for joining us for this hour. And Norbert, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thanks again to Norbert for being a great guest today and for the conversation. To learn more about him, his books, his website, and more, look for links in the show notes or go to leanblog.org/474.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.